When people hear Mayerling, they think of a tragic love story. The doomed crown prince and the young baroness who chose death over separation. The official version is neat, almost theatrical. Rudolf shoots Mary Vetsera, then himself, in a fit of romantic despair. The imperial court, horrified, mutters about a burst aneurysm and only later admits to suicide. It's a narrative born to preserve dignity, but history seldom grants us tidy endings.
Indeed. The more you study Mayerling, the more it looks like a hall of mirrors. Even that first story, the murder-suicide, comes undone when you start looking closer. Yes, in 2015, those long-lost farewell letters from Mary were found, and they seem genuine. She writes of love, of shared destiny, of leaving this world together. That does support the suicide pact. Yet everything around it, the secrecy, the missing evidence, the rapid cleaning of the scene, breathes politics, not passion.
True, the cleanup was suspiciously thorough, but the letters are hard to dismiss. They are physical, contemporaneous, signed by her own hand. Combined with testimony from Mizzi Kaspar, the courtesan Rudolf had previously asked to die with him, they portray a man spiraling into darkness long before Mayerling. Chronic depression, venereal disease, isolation in a rigid court. There's psychological coherence there.
Unless Mizzi Kaspar herself was playing a role, perhaps even an informant. She might have known things about Rudolf's plans that others found dangerous. Because there's another layer, the reformer Rudolf, the intellectual who secretly published articles calling for social change, for modernization, for an empire less shackled to Germany. But Rudolf was not just suicidal, he was subversive.
And in that sense, Mayerling could have been political, a liberal heir in a conservative empire, sympathetic to Hungarian autonomy, wary of Bismarck's iron grip. His very ideas threatened the equilibrium holding Austria-Hungary together. But would that justify his murder? It's a stretch. There's no archival trace, no coded telegram, no assassin's report.
Yet it fits the geopolitical chessboard of the late 1880s. 3 possible players, 3 motives. The Hungarians, for one. Some saw in Rudolf a hope for their own emancipation, perhaps even a future king of an independent Hungary. Others might have feared him, a man who could upend the delicate dual monarchy. Then France, obsessed with breaking the alliance between Austria, Hungary, and Germany. For Paris, removing Rudolf could either hasten a crisis or eliminate a reformer likely to realign the empire in unpredictable ways. And finally, Germany itself. Berlin had every reason to fear a Habsburg heir who spoke of independence from the German orbit. If Rudolf lived to become emperor, the Iron Alliance might melt overnight.
That's the heart of the political elimination theory. Elegant in structure, but fragile in evidence. The problem is, the very existence of Mary Vetsera complicates it. She wasn't an agent or a pawn, she was a girl in love, infatuated with the most tragic man in Europe. Her letters show awareness of death, even eagerness. For this to be a murder disguised as suicide, someone would have had to fabricate those letters in perfect imitation of her hand, seal them in Rudolf's own envelope, and then hide them for a century. That's a high bar for conspiracy.
Unless Rudolf really was planning to die. But not like that, not that night. Imagine, a reformer drawn into a web of intrigue, half willing, half terrified. Perhaps he was pressured, trapped, and in the end the situation was helped along, made to look like the double suicide he'd once fantasized about. A gun, a frightened girl, a cleanup team. The boundary between despair and assassination could be very thin.
You're describing the hybrid theory. Rudolf already suicidal, but the circumstances exploited by others. Possible, though impossible to prove. Still, there are lesser variations. The medical theory, for instance. Some say Mary died accidentally during a clandestine abortion, and Rudolf killed himself out of panic. That idea arose in the 1950s, when Dr. Holler examined her exhumed remains and claimed to find no bullet hole. But the bones had been disturbed, even looted. Any ballistic trace could have vanished long before. And those letters from 2015 make the abortion accident improbable.
Then there's the fight gone wrong story. An argument, a gun, chaos. Frankly, that one feels like gossip from a provincial newspaper. Still, the court's desperate cover-up, first the aneurysm, then the secret burial, does make you wonder what they were really hiding. Was it merely scandal or something darker?
Likely just scandal. The Habsburgs excelled at bearing embarrassment. Consider the emperor's priority, preserving the dynasty's moral image, not pursuing forensic truth. And in the end, the tragedy served a political purpose anyway. With Rudolf gone, the succession passed to Archduke Franz Ferdinand, whose own death in Sarajevo 25 years later would ignite the Great War. One suicide set the stage for another on a continental scale.
A chain of unintended consequences. Still, when I think of Mayerling, I can't help seeing the political ghosts in the room. The French agents, the German watchers, the restless Hungarians, the imperial courtiers whispering in corridors. Maybe none of them pulled the trigger, but they built the world that drove Rudolf to it.
That's fair. The tragedy is both intimate and structural. The lonely despair of one man, and the suffocating weight of an empire that left no room for a liberal crown prince. Whether he was murdered, manipulated, or simply broken, Mayerling remains a parable of how politics devours its dreamers.
So perhaps the truth lies between passion and power. A man who dreamed of reform, cornered by his own ideals, entangled with a girl too young to understand the machinery closing around them. In the end, the empire silenced them, not necessarily with bullets, but with inevitability.
Yes, and the silence still lingers. Every few decades, someone reopens Mayerling, hoping to find a conspiracy. Yet what we really find is the same human question. How does a system destroy its own future? Maybe that not the gunshot is the real mystery of Mayerling.
And that's the final irony. The empire that feared reform died anyway, and left us only the myth of a doomed prince, a lost girl, and a hunting lodge that became Europe's most haunting metaphor.
The Mayerling Enigma, then, isn't about who killed whom. It's about how an empire kills hope.
And how history buries love beneath politics, until all that remains is the echo of a shot in a winter forest.
So, if we must choose among all these theories, I'd say the simplest answer still stands. Not because it is comforting, but because it fits every solid piece of evidence we actually have. Rudolf and Mary died by their own hands. The letters, the psychological pattern, the earlier proposal to Missy Kasper, it all points to a long-nurtured death wish, not to a staged execution.
I agree. The political shadows are fascinating. Germans fearing defection, Hungarians plotting independence, France stirring the pot, yet they all remain circumstantial. There is motive everywhere, but no fingerprints, no orders, no credible trace of an operation. The documents we do have, especially those farewell notes sealed in Rudolf's envelope, belong to a private tragedy, not a coup d'etat.
Exactly. Mayerling was not an assassination dressed as romance. It was romance consumed by despair, framed by politics only in the background. The empire didn't murder Rudolf. It suffocated him. It built a world where a man of his ideals had nowhere left to stand except at the edge of his own revolver.
And that's why this theory endures above all the rest, because it doesn't need secret agents or missing bullets to make sense. It only needs what we already know. A brilliant, restless prince trapped in an empire allergic to change, and a girl who mistook his ruin for love. That is the most probable truth. Not conspiracy, not accident. Just the slow, inevitable collapse of two fragile souls beneath the weight of history. A brilliant, restless prince trapped in an empire allergic to change, and a girl who mistook his ruin for love. That is the most probable truth. Not conspiracy, not accident. Just the slow, inevitable collapse of two fragile souls beneath the weight of history.
A love story, rewritten by despair.
And an empire that mistook tragedy for order, until it perished in the same illusion.